Welcome to episode 28 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about a very special player who can play both center and wing, but he's a hybrid style player that plays mostly center on the Edmonton Oilers. That is Leon Draisaitl. Now, Leon Draisaitl is a really fascinating player. Ever since he was drafted by the Oilers back in 2014, you look at the makeup of his game coming out of the Prince Albert Raiders, and you can see a power forward player and a power skill type of forward who can generate a lot in and around the net. He could generate a lot at tight, really good with puck protection at that age to be able to protect pucks and utilize puck protection inside sequences as well. And then you look together at how he's able to link together the next play and how he's able to link together the next patterning within his game at the junior level and beyond that point. Now it's evolved in Edmonton now. His puck protection game's really taken off. He's become actually more of a linear crossover threat. So when using his feet, using linear crossovers, he's way more of a threat, much bigger of a threat. And he's really come to fruition when being able to utilize his backhand and being able to utilize his backhand in small area spaces. Now, in linking that together in the offensive zone can be challenging at times because especially for players who are trying to shoot off their backhand or make passes off their backhand, some players struggle with that and struggle to adapt to that. However, when you look at the makeup of Draisaitl's game and how well he's able to utilize and incorporate that backhand side and being able to pass in many different areas, you can pass back, you can pass to small area space, you can pass to across the Royal Road as well. And inside the offensive zone, he can link together a lot of different plays when utilizing his backhand and specifically his playmaking when it comes to his backhand as well. So with Draisaitl, there's a lot of intrigue when it comes to his backhand and how well he's able to utilize that. And then you look on the flip side of things and how well he's able to use his forehand in general. Obviously, he's a really big threat with his shoot threat and his shot threat elements, how well he can shoot the puck, how well he can shoot in tight, how well he can shoot around, shoot inside deception, shoot within narrow stances. So when he's very uncomfortable stances within his feet, he can still shoot in many different ways. He's so good at doing it. So you look at the overall ability within his game, and he's so dynamic and obviously not necessarily the most dynamic skater. But when you look at his linear crossover play, his ability to link together his sequences with his hockey sense, how well he's able to anticipate now and how well he's adapted in terms of his anticipation inside the offensive zone, being able to move into space in a timely manner and being able to understand when to move into space. So you look at the overall makeup of his game, and it's really intriguing as a power skill forward. And obviously, he's really elite too when it comes to holding on to pucks, being able to protect pucks in small area sequences, being able to extend possessions along the boards, or it could be a low to high sequence. He's really adept at using his size and his core strength and some of his lower body, but a lot of his core strength actually to be able to leverage that ability, leverage that puck protection ability, and leverage that ability to withstand contact in many different situations. And what I like about his game now too is the neutral zone play and how well and how much he's adapted 1v1 and utilizing his feet to manipulate guys inside the neutral zone. So you look at Leon Draisaitl, and obviously we've mentioned he's not the perfect skater. There's some pivot issues. There's some issues in how he can transition from his outside edges. But in terms of his neutral zone play and his fluidity within his feet, it has gotten a lot better. Over the years, it's gotten tremendously amount. And it's continued to improve, and he's continued to evolve in sequences in small area spaces in neutral zone as well. So being able to get off the wall is one area that's helped him. But when I look at the depth of his 1v1 game and how he can use deception and manipulation now off the rush, that actually is a really big threat. And he can use some speed elements in there as well. And what I like about this is that when you add together the puck protection for a guy who's really good at using and really adept at using puck protection already at his size in general, and you link together the rest of that ability with how well he can understand how to manipulate and incorporate deception with his puck skills. So inside the neutral zone, you have a lot of different elements now with that type of player because if it's a small player, you could easily knock that player off the puck if you're a defenseman. With Draisaitl, it's much more difficult. And obviously, he has the strength to be able to extend those possessions quite frequently as well. In the defensive zone, he's not necessarily the flashiest player, not necessarily someone you rely on in D zone situations, but you look at the neutral zone and the O zone play, that's where he shines at his best. And he's really intriguing when it comes to his off rush play in general. What I like is his middle lane dynamic in terms of how he's been able to attack as well. And that's another intriguing thing with how he's been able to manipulate the middle lane and be able to incorporate a lot of different playmaking elements and also playmaking playmaking elements off the rush upon offense's zone entry as well. So Draisaitl, there's obviously a lot of intrigue when it comes to that. And when you look at his playoff run and how well he's able to perform in the playoffs too, that's another big factor in terms of not only the neutral zone play, but how he's able to extend possession and generate offense as well. So with his game, there's obviously a lot of power play value too. And you think about how well him and McDavid link together in power plays. Obviously, their expected goal numbers each individually are going to be sky high, but you look at their game and how well they play together in the power play, cross seam, railroad, being able to find backdoor sequences. Either it's McDavid passing or Draisaitl passing, one of the two. And then you look at the other circumstances of how well Draisaitl can be available on the back door, how well he can be in position, how well he can shoot off the catch, shoot off one timer, shoot on one leg, shoot from uncomfortable angles. He's doing a lot of different sequences. So that's right. Right. No, I'm trying to rephrase that. He's doing a lot of different angles correctly inside power play sequences because he's also a really big threat. And a lot of players who are one-time threats are usually stationed on the face-off circle on their strong side in terms of handedness. So Draisaitl is really good at locking down those angles on the power play because we mentioned he can score from the goal line, and he's done it before. He scored from the goal line plenty of times, not only in the playoffs but regular season. But you look at how well he shoots off the railroad passes, off those cross seam passes in the face-off circle. So he's a really big dynamic threat there when it comes to that element, and it comes to his overall game inside the offensive zone on the power play specifically as well. Obviously, an elite shot threat, so that links together his expected goals numbers because he already has sky high not only expected goals for, but expected goals for percentage and expected goals numbers in general. So the shooting models are linked to higher, not only higher percentages, but higher overall values. So he's shooting in higher quality areas, which is also a really good thing when talking about his game because you don't want players who are just shooting from the perimeter. And Draisaitl, ever since his junior days, he's continued to evolve at being a high danger scoring threat and being an interior shooting threat. So you see the numbers and you see the actual analytics of how well he's able to shoot on the power play, how well he's able to incorporate expected goal numbers at 5-on-5, at many different even strength situations, and also power play as well. Now you're getting a player who can really shoot from interior space and really understand how to leverage those angles, which is really important to have those quick strike style players. And there's not a ton of them, right? Austin Matthews is another good example of that, who he's a quick strike player, but in terms of XGF, XG, and XGF percentage, he's dynamic threat 5-on-5, even strength, and on the power play as well. Similar to Draisaitl, obviously stylistically different players, but that's the first thing that came to my mind when talking about another player who is in a somewhat similar comp to him. And so obviously we mentioned the XGA, the PK situations, and the even strength defense, you're not going to get a ton of value out of him necessarily, but you're obviously relying on him for his offensive value. That puts sky high offensive value on his game and on his offensive touch. So with him and his overall game, you're getting the wins above replacement and those numbers from his offensive value, his offensive touch, and how well he's able to produce. Because he's obviously a 100-point scorer who can score endless amount of goals, especially playing with McDavid on the power play and sometimes 5-on-5 as well, depending on if they play together or not. So at Draisaitl, that's a really intriguing element to his game. And the shot threat is just so dynamic. You can't really say enough about it because it's very different from a lot of different players. Because like Steven Stamkos, when he shoots, he can shoot and he can turn his body with so much mobility. With Draisaitl, there's not necessarily as much rotational inertia when you see him actually shoot and you see him shoot through and follow through. So with him, what's really different is how sometimes you see him drop to one knee, he'll shoot, but he doesn't really turn his body as often, or sometimes he'll shoot from odd angles and hard angles. He won't move his body as much. Obviously, those are different situations. So those are more important to not move your body. If you're rotating your body, you might miss the net if you're from the goal line, for example. But with him, it's so interesting because he doesn't necessarily have the mobility like an Alex Ovechkin or a Steven Stamkos with how freely they move within the middle parts of their body. he's not necessarily like that. So what's really unique is the power he's able to generate, the power output he generates on his shots, and how he does it so consistently. And even Austin Matthews could be another example of that. He has some rotational inertia of how well he can actually shoot through, follow through. And obviously, he's a player, he can shoot with uncomfortable feet positioning. He can shoot from basically an upright posture. So you don't necessarily need a ton of rotational inertia. He doesn't need to use a ton of excess energy by rotating. He can shoot pretty much immediately. And but it's interesting how he's one of those players where you don't necessarily see as much mobility, but you still see so much power output within his shots. And that's one thing that's really intriguing when I look into the depth of his game and how well and how consistent he is, not only at 5-on-5, but power play as well. But obviously, overall, a dynamic threat. You're getting a player who's going to be consistently more likely not going to rack up 100 points a year and continue to get better and continue to improve. He's had his best years already, and he'll probably find ways to get better beyond that point, especially in a higher scoring NHL in the modern day, where players are literally racking up video game numbers nowadays. It's so easy to. It's become so much easier too. So with Draisaitl, obviously a very important component to Edmonton's team, their playoff run, how consistent not only Draisaitl is all the time, but how consistent he is to the Edmonton market as well.